And we're live. Welcome back to another Corona Geek here, where we talk all about mobile app development using Corona SDK. I'm your host, Charles McKeever, and this week we are joined by an excellent panel of guests here. We've got Dr. Brian Burton, author of many books on Corona SDK. Also joining us is the author of Coroniums. Hey, Chris. Chris Byerly is a regular and Superman in many ways. Also joining us is Ed Marina from RoamingGamer.com. He really wants to be a rodeo clown in his spare time, but they wouldn't let him into clown college. And joining us also is Ray from StinkyKitties.com. Hey, Ray, how you doing? And Sergey Lurg. Hey, Sergey, thank you for joining us. SpiralCodeStudios.com. Thanks for being here. All right, so we got a nice little lineup here. Everybody's here. I got the Brain Trust with us today. We're going to talk about animated counters. We're going to talk about content scaling, and we're also going to talk about selling apps in China, some of the events that are making it difficult to penetrate that market, especially if you are trying to market to, let's just say, government workers in China. So that tends to be an interesting conversation. We'll get into that a little bit later. So I want to ask, does anybody on the panel have anything that they want to announce? Does anybody have any special super secret sauce projects that they're working on, or updates, or anything that they want to talk about?
Sure, I'll jump in first.
Go for it.
I'm doing a discount or sale for Corona Geek followers for any of the Corona books that I've written. If you go to burtonsmediagroup.com and use the coupon code Corona Geek, you can get a 20% discount on any of the beginning or learning or mobile app development or any of the books that have been written. I'm going to run that probably through the end of the year, but take advantage of it now. You have a chance to save a little bit and get up to running on Corona SDK.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a reminder, everybody who's listening who maybe has not purchased their book yet, Dr. Burton does a great job of putting advanced copies of his books out there and then keeping them updated as things become new. Because this technology thing is not a standstill, one-time only sort of thing. It keeps moving, and Brian, I think it's very interesting to see other big publishers kind of following this same trend. I've noticed this quite a bit here lately.
Yeah, a few publishers are starting to put out advanced copies and update, but they're still not continuing to update after that first version. I'm continuing to update after the initial release. The beginning mobile app development with Corona and mobile app development with Corona were both released originally back, the early released in August of 2011, and they're now both on version 1.7. So they're getting updated about 3 to 4 times per year based upon advances in the Corona SDK. And I've already put out a minor update to learning mobile app development with Corona, and it was finalized back in, early July? I think that's right. So it's already had a minor update to it.
I've been keeping up with some of the web technologies. There's an open source technology out there called Meteor, which does this real-time interactive type development where anytime your data source updates, your screen updates, and you don't have to really, as a developer, you don't have to write all the low-level code to make all that happen. It's just sort of, just like Corona, just sort of it abstracts a lot of that stuff for you. And one of the things that the community itself is doing, I think, is interesting, is there's one guy that's actually, they have a book, and you can buy access to that book, and then they have different tiers, almost like some of these crowdfunded things where you can buy at this tier and you just get the access to the book, but you can also buy at this other tier and you get interviews with the developers, and then if you buy at this third tier, then you get a T-shirt and the videos and the book. And then there's another guy that's doing videos, and his is more of a subscription-based type thing where he continually puts out videos as the software puts out new versions, he puts out new videos that talks about the different nuances of what's coming and things like that. And it just seems like that's where books have to go. Even
yes, especially textbooks, but yes.
Yeah, it just seems like
books, textbooks, they have to go that way.
It makes so much sense because the difference between version 1, version 1.2, or version 2, or whatever, it just things change, and it just seems to have a lot of value in that space. And as a developer who wants to be up on things, I'm subscribed to several of those, just because I know that the information is going to be fresh and it's going to be an ongoing conversation and stuff like that. So anyway, so if you guys haven't had a chance to go over to burtonsmediagroup.com, I highly recommend you do. Dr. Burton keeps everything up to date, and he's very generous with his information and his time. So it's a win-win. So go save 20%. Use Corona Geek at checkout, and like I like to say, they're small. Collect the whole set.
Some time ago, I have checked several books on Corona SDK, and Brian's books are one of the best for sure. Yeah,
by far. It's a lot of effort and time to develop those types of things. So, somebody once told me that you don't have to run faster than the other guy; you just have to run farther than the other guy. And you certainly have run a long way.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun doing it, and it's always exciting to hear people I get emails from people all over the world that are developing mobile apps and have questions about something not working quite the way they expected it to, or just wanting to do something different. And it's really neat to have this great interaction with people all over the world, not just the students that I originally wrote the book for, which were at my university, but to have then that interaction with people that are interested in learning mobile app development from all over the world. That's a lot of fun. Oh, and Chris and I have a second announcement. We have started a group. We've been doing research on multiplayer mobile application development, and so we developed a clan on Clash of Clans to just simply experiment. It's a non-competitive, help each other out, figure out how they did things. Clash of Clans is making a little over $1 million a day doing their game, and I'm sure all of us would like to be doing the same thing, making that kind of income from the mobile apps that we've created. So we started our own clan just to do some basic research and figure out how they've done it, and then learn from companies that have done it right, and be able to create our own mobile apps. So it's the clan's called Corona Geek. No spaces, and anybody's welcome to join. There's no requirements. It's just a friendly learning experiment.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, definitely. If I wasn't already hooked up with a family clan, I would probably be jumping all over that. But I don't think my wife would enjoy me leaving the clan to go.
Not allowed to leave the family clan.
I'm not allowed to leave the family clan. No, exactly. Yeah, the virtual reality of that becomes a real reality of that. So.
It's interesting doing that, kind of just playing that game as a research as opposed to just playing a game, and it really makes you think about a lot of the mechanics and what's going on, and I'm definitely already have started a number of prototypes just based off of studying some of that, so I'm hoping that as those grow we can share some of that too.
It's interesting you say that, because you almost have to take note of what the mechanics that are actually in the game, but then also what is it that drives you to go back to the game.
Yeah, there's a lot of psychology involved.
There is, because I tend to I avoided it for the longest time. I didn't really want to get involved in it, but then once I was involved in it, I sort of was invested in the process, and there was all these maintenance things that you have to do in order to continue the process, and those always drove me back. The way that they use push notifications, or the way that they time things, and it's an interesting thing. And if you play Boom Beach, which is created by the same company, they overlap. They use some similar mechanics, but it's very much a different experience. So you almost have
Yes.
to, you almost want to play both games just to compare notes between the two.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Boom Beach was their. Yeah, it's neat to study it stuff.
Clash of Clans was
Yeah, Clash of
Boom
Clans
Beach
was
came
first.
later.
Yeah, and in some respects, I mean, if you watch the forum conversations and things like that in Boom Beach, people are saying they don't want the exact same mechanics as they have in Clash of Clans. You know, they want a different
Right.
experience. They don't, you know, they've already played Clash of Clans and they like it or don't like it, or they're already playing it and they don't want to replicate that, you know, 100% over in Boom Beach. They want a different experience. But so it's interesting.
Yeah, the Clash of Clans, they definitely have got it really dialed in as far as, you know, the production work, and they've refined it obviously over the years. But it's pretty interesting. It's simple. It's actually quite simple stuff, which is always the best stuff. But it's just the way they present it.
Yeah, most definitely. So when you guys get some more notes collected around that, let's do a whole show around just, you know, our research and what we found. I think that would be a great conversation.
I think so too.
Anybody else have any announcements?
Absolutely.
Go ahead. Chris, you have an announcement?
No, I'm just deep in a couple game prototypes right now, and I'm hoping to be able to pull some lessons out of those for Chromium GS. They're all real-time based, and so I'm just kind of getting no sleep doing that right now, and hopefully I'll share some of that soon.
Do you tend to wake up in the middle of the night and scribble things down and write ideas, or how does it hit you in a flash, or are you just kind of working on this one long thought?
Usually it'll be one idea, and then it spins out into different. Now I have 4 different prototypes off of the same idea that I had, so just a matter of keep playing with them and seeing which ones work. But when I'm on the creative cycle, I'm up at about 1 in the morning, and I work till about 6 or 7. Then I go down for a little bit longer and get up and do it some more. It's the quiet time's the best time.
Wait, what?
What time did you say you actually get to sleep?
Well, I get up. I'll go to bed early evening and get up around 1, and then work till about 6, and then take a few more hours of snooze and get up and do some more. It's that quiet time is the best time.
Wow, that's amazing. I don't think I could pull that off. At least it wouldn't be sustainable. I could do it a few days.
I'm just laying in bed thinking about it, so I figure I might as well just do it.
Yeah, well there you go. Just out of curiosity, on an average, what do you say you sleep a night? What's your?
It depends what I'm doing. So it just changes throughout the week. I'd say my worst nights are maybe like 5 hours. But anybody can survive on 5 hours if they want to.
Oh yeah. It's definitely 5 hours is definitely doable. It's just a matter of quality. You know, quality of coherence.
Quality of coffee and coherence.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's interesting.
I deal with too many people, so I can just be out of my mind at whatever time I need to be.
It's interesting. Some of the most I guess productive developers that I've ever known are like that. They have a hard time sleeping, and they just get up and crank out code. That's what they like to do. So me, I like to sleep. I like to sleep a lot.
Yeah.
I like to sleep a lot, about 9 hours a night. More if I can get it. All right. Any other announcements? All right. Let's give everybody a reminder that if they didn't get a chance to see last week's show, we talked about Android TV, Game Circle, and reskinning games. And specifically, Greg Pugh came on. He talked about getting his games ported over to support the Android TV, and he was trying to get his game into the App Store. And Sergey gave us some tips on how to manipulate the manifest after you've built your app. Greg still hasn't quite worked out all the fine details. I'm not sure if it's just there's a gap between his experience in that area, or if it's something key piece of information is missing or whatever. But the guys at Corona are definitely interested in getting support for that. Of course, we're working on the next version of the public release, and so just prioritize everything. But hopefully, maybe if Greg can get that worked out, or if we can collaborate somehow. Maybe we can crack the code on that. But if you guys haven't had a chance, go back and watch Corona Geek 113. Sergey gave out some great information there, and you can see the full demo by Greg on his app and everything he was working on. So that was a good show. All right, so we got
if Corona would allow us to edit Android manifest before signing up. So you hit build, you put a checkbox like I want to edit manifest file, then it pops out, you edit it, and it continues the build. I think it's possible.
That would be interesting. Would there be how many occasions do you think there would be for manifest manipulation? I mean, how many use cases are there?
Well, very few.
You think so? Yeah, but yeah, it still is an option. Well, yeah, the material that you showed last week was really really good stuff. So I think that on those rare occasions that somebody might need to edit, it would be good to just have some really solid steps to follow. That would definitely make it open up some possibilities there. Because once you said edit the manifest file after you built it, I was like, you can do that? That was a surprise to me. So because I never need to or think to. So all right, well yeah, hopefully we can get that worked out. I mean, I know, like I said, the guys the engineers at Corona, they've got an eye on it. They even have a unit in-house. They got an Android TV unit in-house. Anytime that something comes out that's like this, it's an obvious something to look at. They try to get a test unit so that they can get it in-house and start understanding all the different pieces. So it's definitely on the list. All right, so we've got a winner here for the 2048 Hex. So basically, in October, we did a Geek Games contest, and we played 2048 Hex, which is Sergey's game over at SpiralCodeStudios.com. And it looks like Karim came in at just over 68,000. He had 68,062. Yeah, which I actually thought I saw. I thought I saw on the Facebook wall, and forgive me if it just disappeared for some reason. The Facebook wall doesn't. While it seems to be a very communal place where we can share things, it doesn't. It seems to kind of push everything off to the side when people post their scores and stuff. So I thought I saw something that was in the 100,000 mark, but then when I went back to look for it, I couldn't find it. Given that. Basically, I'm going to declare Karim as the winner, and so congratulations, Karim. You're going to get a $50 gift card to the retailer of your choice. I'll contact you via Facebook, and we'll figure all that out. But what game should we play for November? Do you guys have a recommendation of what we should play for November? Just a high score game, something we can really do simple. I didn't think far enough ahead to actually come up with a game. We could play. What's the one that's popular right now? RGB Express. Have you guys seen that one? I don't know if it has a height. I mean, like.
I have beaten all the levels of RGB Express.
You've beaten all the levels. Well, we can't play that one.
But it's a really good game. You should try it.
Okay. Yeah, it is a good game, and I don't know if you guys saw it was in, or it still may be in the Apple App Store. It was featured, and the last thing that I had heard from the developer, they'd had over 2 million downloads of the.
Amazing.
Yeah, which is amazing, right? So and
it's a paid application, so $3 you buy 2 millions.
I just stabbed Sergey in the heart. He's like, "Oh, I'm hit."
I feel stabbed too.
I can't do
the show anymore. I gotta go cry. Okay.
That's what Brian did. I think he put on his avatar there. You see on his camera, he's crying over there in the corner. But yeah, RGB Express is a cool game. I mean, I like it. I haven't tried to beat all the levels yet, as Sergey has, but. All right, well, we'll come up with a game. We'll come up with a November Geek Games game and play it. So if you guys have suggestions, here we go. Here's what we'll do is put them in the comments of this video, and let's talk about what we want to play against each other and do for a high score. Something that's simple and high score-ish. And it doesn't have to be a Corona game. I mean, it'd be cool if it was a Corona game, but we can play something else too. It's all right. It's all good.
You know, the
All right.
fact that these people do, come around and make these millions of dollars real quickly should give us all hope that, it's still happening, so it means it can still happen. So keep making your stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely.
That doesn't mean I'm not going to cry a little bit.
Oh, definitely cry, but use those tears as inspiration.
Here we are.
That's right. Yeah, I watched this thing on Ford over the weekend, this documentary on Ford, and he was talking about, or the documentary was talking about the fact that he was so hard on his son, Edsel, and his son was a little more, he was just a little more gentle, who came from a different generation, and he wasn't, he didn't have life nearly as hard as his father had had. Anyway, so at the end, Edsel dies of stomach cancer or something, and his dad says, to somebody, his Ford says, do you think that I was overly hard or cruel to Edsel? And the person said, well, I don't know that you were cruel to him, but you were certainly, not all that fair to him. You were just definitely severe. He says, and so Ford says, well, what would you have done if I had been like that to you? And this guy said, well, I would have gotten mad. I would have been angry. And Ford says, well, that's what I wanted him to do. I wanted him to get mad. He wanted him to become this powerhouse of, fight back, right? And so yeah, use those tears to take yourself to the next level. Or just get crushed. Or just get crushed by the overwhelming looming of your father. One of the two. I don't know which one it is.
Let's not go there.
Let's not go there. Okay, so here's one other thing we want to talk about. If you guys haven't noticed, or haven't seen it, there's a blog post out there by Space Wolf. He put a tutorial out that is actually adding interstitial ads to your Windows Phone 8 apps. So I'll put a link in the show notes. I did tweet it and Facebook it and all that kind of stuff. But it's got a full tutorial on everything that you need to do to get interstitials implemented into your Windows Phone 8 apps, which I thought was pretty cool. So it kind of took the initiative not only to work it out, but also to document the steps and share it with everybody else, which is really super cool. All right, what else we got? Let's see. I think that's all for the announcements. Last week we did talk about Game Circle, so I wanted to kind of circle back around. See what I did there? Game Circle. I wanted to circle back around and point out one thing that I thought was interesting in the notes, and it's not necessarily what has to do with Corona's implementation of the plugin, but it's just something about WhisperSync in general. WhisperSync is, if you remember, was Game Circle's seamless synchronization between devices, right? So you could play a game on one device and then move to a different device and pick up where you left off. And so the one thing that I saw that was interesting about WhisperSync was that game data cannot be deleted. So it was sort of this authoritative cloud, what do you want to call it, repository of data, right? So once it's out there, it's out there. So what the suggested in the documentation was that if you're going to experiment with things, you might want to do that on a sandbox account or a test account during development to ensure that you're not polluting your WhisperSync data that's associated with your personal or your company's account, right? So you don't want to start, collect a bunch of garbage, and then once you post your game, you get all this, legacy garbage or whatever. So just note that's one thing to take into consideration. And most of the administration and setup and all that kind of stuff like that is done on Amazon servers. So it's not something that you really have to worry about in the code or the plugin so much, but it's something that you would want to address on Amazon's system. So definitely just be sure to be aware of that. And that's all mentioned in the documentation and as well. So if you go through the Corona docs or Amazon docs, you should come across that as a note. All right, so let's talk about animated score counters. So there was a blog post that was put out back in July, actually, on animated score counters, and I just wanted to kind of go through some of the fine points of it and just point out how it works. So did you guys get a chance to see that? I know it's been a while. Maybe you might have forgotten.
I forgot, but did see it.
Yeah, let me pull up. If you had, of course, we'll put a link in the show notes. But if you hadn't seen it, you can go to coronalabs.com/blog, and it's there as well. So let me, what do I want here? I want to move. Let me just give me a second here. Let me move my desktops around. So I've got here, hopefully you can see this, I've got the code and the app running here. Okay, so let me just refresh the app real quick. So basically it does this, which is going to look a little weird on the screen here just because of the latency of Google Hangouts, but basically what we're doing is we're counting up our score from 0 to what was the initial score here? 750,800. Okay, but we're doing that. We're doing that inside of, I think it's like 2 or 3 seconds here. Yeah, 2 seconds. So what we're doing is we're jumping. We're not just jumping, or no, we're not just counting sequentially from 1 to 750,000. We're counting in chunks, so that the counter, when you refresh it, the counter looks like it's spinning through a set of numbers. So let me just let me adjust this code window here just a little bit, just so we can kind of get it all on the page. All right. So let's go through the code on this. There's a couple of key concepts. Let me just pull up my notes here. There's a couple of things. One is passes. How many passes do you need to do in order to accomplish this? And each time that you do, how much do you need to increment each time in order to accomplish sort of the block jump from, maybe 1 to 25,000 or 30,000 or whatever, right? You need to go from, big chunks of numbers. So the code for this is pretty straightforward. It's all here on the screen, really. You just set up yourself a new text. So we're just going to put some text on the screen. We create a variable to have our top score. So of course, if you were going to implement this in a game, this wouldn't be hard coded to a score, but it would be some variable that would represent the score. And then you have a couple of things like you want the down here at the bottom you have like your duration, what you want the frames per second to be, and then you just make a call to your show score function. So one of the things to take note is Corona's it's frames based, so it's all frames per second. So we have 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second in Corona. So if you change this to like 60 frames per second, then you get a different result because it's twice as many frames.
Okay. So can I point something out?
Yeah, point it out.
Okay. You don't need any of that FPS stuff.
Yeah.
You could just change line 13 to duration divided by display.fps.
Duration. Here.
Yeah. The display contains the current FPS setting for the app based on what you put in config.lua. There's a field under display.
Yeah, but isn't it using frames per second here?
Yeah, I'm just saying is instead of having to set it manually in your code, you could let it discover it.
I got you. Okay, good point. Yeah, because it's already defined in your settings, so just pull it out here. But I guess, would there be a time, do you think, when you might want to have the game do one thing and then the score counter do another?
No. What do you think? What do you guys think? I always poke on Sergey. Sergey, what do you think?
I think you should read my pro tip of the day, number 34.
You think what? It should do what?
My pro tip, I was talking about the same functionality but using transition 2. Have you seen in the comments for the blog post?
Yeah. Let's go back to. Let me see if I can pull that up because I remember.
I've derailed this.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up. I mean, couldn't you do this through the transition? I guess Sergey just said he wrote about it, but that seems like a simpler way to do it.
Yeah, you can copy paste the code from my page, and it will work.
We're terrible.
Later.
Where was it? Was it this one here, the top one?
Yeah.
He's got it.
Yeah.
The last one.
I used to do that in ActionScript all the time. Just use the transition.
Yeah, people forget you can use transition for all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, it's cool.
Just display object manipulation. Any object field on a table or a display object.
Oh, awesome. So yeah, so I'll include that in the show notes as well. So that would be cool. So a couple of different ways to do it then, I guess. So let me go back to
With
here.
transition, you are not dependent on the FPS, and you can use all kinds of transitions like ease in, ease out, in quad for transitioning the numbers. And which one? Out expo looks really nice on numbers.
That looks real good.
Yeah, that would give you a more organic feel, depending on what you were trying to do with your effect, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can do it in just a couple lines of code.
Nice.
It starts fast, and when it comes to the end, it slows down.
Was that Ed? Was that sarcasm? What were you doing there?
No, it wasn't sarcasm. I don't know what it was.
I couldn't tell what you
Smart aleckism?
were. Smart aleckism.
Well, the drawback to doing it with transition is you would probably want to keep track of the last transition schedule in case you had to cancel it to update the score again. You wouldn't necessarily need to do that, but instead of having overlapping transitions occurring at the same time. You understand what I'm saying?
No, not really.
Okay, so using the transition technique, let's say that your score was updating from 0 to 100,000 over 2 seconds. And then 1 second later, you decided to update it to 200,000 from its current score. You could simply just do another transition, but then you'd have 2 overlapping updates.
Ah.
Which
Okay.
would not break anything. It would still work fine, but no need to do it.
Right. Wouldn't add any extra value.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, cool. So we've got we can do it from discover it from the config. We can do it from we can do it using transitions, or we can statically define it, I guess, in the app if we wanted to, or we could put it in the settings file, right? We could have a module file where we control all these things as well. Okay. So so there's to the two things then is one, this lerp function, which I think is actually a technical term. Is actually doing the what was I to say? What was before? There was the passes and the increment. So I think what was it? What does the? I'm looking at my notes here. Hold on. I think the linear interpretation is the increments. So it figures out how many numbers it should jump, right? So it has a block of numbers that it should jump each time. And then within our show score, we're gonna pass in the target, which is going to be our score text. So the actual new text that we're going to put onto the screen there. Then our value, which is going to, in this case, going to be our score, because it's all represented down here. So it's going to be our score. The duration, which is our duration, that's pretty straightforward, and the frames per second, which is the frames per second. So we're going to check to see if there's a value. So basically, is there a score? Do we pass a score at all to the thing? If we don't pass a score to it, if it's 0, then we're just going to return. We're going to kick it out. We're not going to do anything. But if we have a score greater than 0, I guess, we're going to say we're going to set this new score equal to 0, and then we're going to which is actually looping through. So we're going to set it to 0 because we want our initial value to be 0, and then we're going to figure out the number of passes that we're going to do, which is the duration divided by the frames per second. And then that increment is going to be the lerp. So we're going to figure out, okay, how many passes do we need to do? And each pass, how many numbers do we need to jump? What's our increment? So then we set up our loop counter, and then we go in, and in this function on the inside here, we update the text. And so we're going through here, and each time we loop through, because we're looping through basically because we're creating a runtime event listener. It's going to work on inner frame, so the frames per second. This is where it all comes in, right? So we're going to every frame we're going to update the text. So here we're going to execute this every time, and each time we do, we're either going to do one of two things. We're either going to increment our score, or when we get to the end, basically we've reached almost the end of our top score, whatever the score is up here, whatever this final score is. when we've kind of reached that and there's nothing else to increment, then we're going to just basically just show the score itself. So we're kind of like going from 0, and then we're jumping through a bunch of incrementing through a bunch of numbers, and then at the end we kind of want to show that final score as is. And that's it. It's all pretty straightforward, and the rest of it's just there's some stuff here about formatting the numbers and that sort of thing. But when we get the other thing is that when we get done, we remove the event listener so that we don't need it anymore. So we're done. I thought it was a nice little piece of code though. So
it's a good piece of code. I wanted to say that we all jumped in there on our little improvements. Sergey's being the largest improvement, taking it down to basically one line of code. But I think the benefit of this tutorial is not in learning how to create a rolling counter. It's in learning the principles of linear interpolation, creating a forward declared function that's later on used in remove event listener, and understanding the whole enter frame concept, both starting one and ending one. These are all things that you would have to
using leading zeros.
Sir?
I say, as well as understanding how to format a string number using leading zeros.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely. You're right. I don't think that some of these examples are definitely task specific. How to create an animated counter. But you're right that the intrinsic value is all these other little pieces. I love the little snippets of code that show you how to do the loop, or like Sergey says, how to format the numbers, and all those different pieces, because you can take each one of those out and put them into your own toolbox, and then you can reapply them in different ways.
I think that if people went directly to the one-line solution, yeah, sure, they'd have that solution for that problem, but not exercise their brain understood all the rest of this. I don't think they'd get the benefit out of it.
Right. All right. Well, good. We'll put a link to that in the show notes, and that's definitely on the blog. And if you want, you can just take the code that's represented there and just paste it right into a new main.lua, and from there you're set to go. Which I think is another reason that this was the frames per second were actually defined in the code itself, just to keep the example self-contained. It wasn't actually coming from any other place, which is always a good thing. So let's talk about let's move on and talk about adaptive content scaling.
Well, let's talk about something really complicated.
I know it. Tell me about it. Well, here's the thing: is that I really don't pay attention to any of that stuff because Corona kind of abstracts a lot of that for you, and so you tend not to. I mean, I don't know. I just tend not to even pay attention to things like virtual pixels or pixel density or any of that kind of stuff like that. But when the new iPhone 6 came out, it seemed like it became a very important topic of conversation. So I thought we would come back around and visit some of these concepts, especially since there's been a bunch of blog posts written about it. And I don't know if you guys have seen those. I was actually going to try to pull up. Let me pull up my list here. I had to restart the machine before we started the show. But basically there's a few blog posts out there. One's called Resolution Independence, Adaptive Content Scaling in Corona. The other one is The Point of Resolution Independence, iOS and iPhone 6 Plus. And the other one was Approximating Density Independence on Android. So each one of those had a different take on things, a different angle on the conversation. But basically what you would want to do is start out, I think it was with the either like the point of resolution of iPhone independence or resolution independence for iOS and Android, or iOS and iPhone 6 Plus, because it talked about how Apple has sort of a standard format for things, even though now they've introduced this new iPhone 6, which is kind of skewed, their lineup a bit, but they've still tried to stick with some consistencies, like the size of what a pixel is, or the size of what certain elements are, like taskbars or toolbars or whatnot.
When you say size, you actually mean physical dimension.
Yeah. So that was one of the other things that was brought up in the conversation, was there's sort of this abstract concept of the size of what's the size of a pixel, but then there was a more real world concept of what constitutes an actual tappable area, because designers are always kind of wrapped up in this idea of being able to reproduce a design in a way that's pixel perfect, so they can create something and then hand it to somebody else, and then when that person implements it, it looks exactly like their design. And I don't know about you guys, but most of the designers that I've ever worked with get really wigged out when something that they worked so very hard on doesn't look the way that they want it to, right? And so designers have had to come from print into digital, and then in digital space they've tried to replicate and make things work in that same traditional space where everything that every pixel is perfect. And then when we get into the devices, like all these Android devices and things like that, that world just kind of gets blown apart. It doesn't really work that way. Yeah. And so as you go through and read through these articles, it talks about virtual pixels. Have you ever really kind of studied virtual pixels on iOS and Android? What that means?
Well,
it's basically what Corona has for content scaling, content dimensions. How it's properly called? Well, when we virtual content space, like 240 by 320.
Yeah. Well, there was so what I got out of the conversation, and again, like I said, I've always ignored this because Corona just sort of abstracts that, and it hasn't been an issue. And so, but apparently, in the iOS camp and the Android camp, there are, they do have definitions for pixels or points and how things are defined, and how something is either what they call in the article a virtual pixel, and it's based on the size and the shape of the pixels and what a group of pixels means, and then Corona has come across and said, okay, look, we're a cross-platform tool, so therefore we need to implement support for this in a way that, one, abstracts it from the developer, and two, makes it to where it's unified between iOS and Android. So that's where the content scaling concept was born in Corona, so that you had things like letterbox and zoom even and all that kind of stuff like that, so that you could automatically scale text and vector objects and images and for different resolutions based on the device that you were looking at. So right now there's, as of build 2460 though, Corona's implemented a whole new thing called adaptive content scaling, which has less to do, like what you were just talking about, Sergey, on a fixed virtual screen size, and it's more like the demonstration that you gave last week or a week before on being able to calculate the actual size of the screen of the device, and then accommodate our scale based on the size of the device.
Adaptive scaling that Corona has introduced is very similar to my solution that I showed earlier, but it's at the same time very different, because my solution aims at pixel perfect graphics, and adaptive scaling aim is to make it dimensional perfect scaling. So similar but very different at the same time.
Yeah.
I like it that there are no more black bars for the adaptive content scaling, and you don't have to mess with it. So your 0, 0 will always be at the top left of the screen, and this is really easier to work with, like with my solution as well.
Yeah,
Like
have
a
you
nicer storyboard?
say that again, Ed?
It's like a nicer storyboard. No black bars.
Why storyboard?
Why do I? I'm sorry, not storyboard. Wrong phrase.
Composer?
No.
Different?
Why did I put storyboard? Okay, forget I said anything. Letterbox. This is what I get. Like a nicer letterbox. So
yeah.
Here, I've confused everything at this point, but basically their goal list is to fit it to the screen in such a way that they didn't have any bleed areas, which is the black regions that Sergey was talking about, and that it would maintain the aspect ratio. Number one, it would maintain the aspect ratio, which is the goal of Letterbox. Can keep the aspect ratio of your original design resolution the same as the final resolution that you get on the device.
As far as I understood, it doesn't maintain the aspect ratio, no? Because the content width and content height can be always different. It tries to make it as close as possible, but doesn't guarantee it.
Yeah, well, with the fixed, what they were calling in the article, simple content scaling, there was a fixed virtual size, and so that was kind of like, we are going to pick a dimension, and that's going to be the virtual screen size, and then based on the device itself, that may or may not work for you. So you would pick a mode, you'd pick a letterbox or a zoom even or something like that, and then try to design around that. So with letterbox, you could part of your design could bleed out into the black bar region, and so you would almost sort of fake it. But with the adaptive scaling, yeah, it's the aspect ratio of the virtual screen matches the actual device screen, which means that there's no bleed region. So basically, it just tries to go edge to edge and not have a bleed region at all. But it's all dynamically calculated. So then you can't do things like if you were going to do a button and you were going to put it in the left corner or something, you'd have to make sure that your code is figuring out where it should be instead of statically defining it should be in one place.
I must be reading this. It's worth noting, I said this before we started the show, that I haven't actually tried this out, so I can't speak from experience yet. But from what I read of the article, I thought number one was, I don't know if you guys can see my screen.
See your cursor.
It's just a black box? Okay.
It's just your cursor.
Charming. All right, it says the aspect ratio of the virtual screen should match the actual device screen.
Which article is that? Which one is that?
It's the adaptive content scaling in Corona article.
Okay.
And then preferred pixel scales should be okay. I may be misreading this. All right. Well, goes to show you should experiment with it before you talk.
Yeah. Those like I said, there was 3 articles that were kind of written, and they were all kind of written separately because basically what we were trying to do internally was get our arms around. Okay, there's an iPhone 6, iPhone 6 Plus. What does that mean? What does it mean cross-platform standpoint? There's actually some links in those articles to other conversations where people outside of the Corona community were just saying, the same conversation was being had of like, what does this mean? And there's all kind of bits in the article about what it also means to scaling. What's your scale factor? What does it mean to your scale factor as well? So how should you choose a scale factor? So I would say the first thing to do would be to read that adaptive content scaling in Corona article, even though it was, I think, written as like maybe the 3rd article in the series, because it gives you kind of a history of scaling according to the way it was implemented in Corona, and then what the new adaptive scaling is supposed to mean. And then when you go back and read the resolution independence for iOS, and then you go back and read the density independence on Android, then what you're doing is you're getting a comparison between the way iOS and Android handle these concepts so you're kind of, one article gives you the big picture, and then the other two articles kind of break it down per platform. So it's kind of an interesting read. The one thing that I took away from most of that stuff was, like Sergey was talking about, there will be some situations where adaptive scaling may work really well for you, and there may be times when you're just wanting to use just a simple content scaling. You may know exactly what you're going after, and you just want to use that. But when you do the adaptive content scaling, that just adds a little bit. It adds more flexibility, but it actually adds a little bit more complexity, because in your code, then you need to make sure that your visual elements accommodate for the fact that the size of the screen, the scale of the screen may be different between devices.
What scares me a little in adaptive scaling is that I'm not quite sure what are the limits for the content width and content height using this mode. So what would be my how to put it, maximum width for the background image, for example? How should I calculate it? So this needs to be sorted out before using adaptive scaling.
So what you're saying, I'm sorry, Sergey, is if you have like a 1024 by 1024 image you'd like to use as your ground, you'd like to know that would work in all cases?
I would like to know how large my background image would have to be to cover all devices using adaptive scaling.
I see what you're saying.
Something like that. Using my way pixel perfect scaling, you set the limits inside inside the config Lua, and using the aspect ratios, and using the test script that I provided, I can see all the contents heights that would be on all the devices. If you remember, I ran a simple script with all the test cases on different devices, and something similar is needed for adaptive scaling.
Yeah, could you do that in your code? Again, under the concept of making the code smarter, could you do that in your code and just set yourself a hard limit and say this is as big as I want it to be?
In my code, yes.
Yeah, but you're just saying it should be something that could be a default or be an option that would just be a part of Corona itself, and then that way you wouldn't have to think of it and compensate for it.
I mean, it must be provided along with adaptive scaling documentation. So it should be using adaptive scaling. You would get such content width and content height on these devices, and it lists all the popular devices, Android and iOS devices, and you would see exactly in pixels, in points, in content points, what dimensions you would deal with.
Okay. Yeah, that's important. Yeah. I'm just trying to wrap my mind around. So sometimes when these topics come up, then I have to figure out how to package that so that I can explain it to somebody else, so that they can then, because the engineers are always wanting to know, like, what's the use case for that? What do you? They want details, which is always so annoying.
So I may be still misunderstanding adaptive scaling, having not used it, but I have a game design that I have deferred because it needed to have the screen elements all be exactly the same size, regardless of what screen you were using. So it had more to do with the placement of your fingers and the size of the elements you were trying to touch. And although I knew how to do it for Apple, once you got into Android, it was a bunch of calculations to get it all right. But it seems to me like once you get this working with adaptive scaling on one device, it should work universally on all other devices, maintaining the same size.
Well, that's one of the things that they talked about in the article was that with adaptive scaling, the pixel scale stays the same. So when there's actually some screenshots of different screenshots. There's actually a picture of different devices lined up next to each other with like a table view implemented in the simple content scaling, and then another picture with them lined up. Yeah, there it is, with them lined up in adaptive scaling. And when
This is adaptive here.
yeah, and when you do the adaptive, then what happens is basically it scales according to the size of the device. So extra rows may actually show up, but the text itself kind of stays proportional to everything else. So, but with the with the simple content scaling, basically everything kind of gets bigger, which is kind of what we're experiencing, I think, on the iPhone 6 right now. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to play with the iPhone 6, but or not the 6, the 6 Plus. I actually like it because the font is bigger and everything is bigger, and I'm thinking eventually what they're going to do is they're going to push an update, which will probably make everything smaller. I'm hoping they if they do that, I hope they leave us an option to be able to kind of go back to this bigger, blown up sort of view, because it makes things really easy to read and get around. But with the simple content scaling, you wind up with your text is bigger and you have fewer rows on the screen and stuff like that. So I think, like Sergey was saying, I think it really kind of depends on what you're doing. If you're doing a game, you may want to use one of those two modes, or you might want to go out and experiment with Sergey's library and see if the way that he's implemented this pixel perfect scaling works for you, because they kind of do the same thing but work in different ways.
I can't think of a scenario where we don't have a solution now. Between the scalings, the 4 scalings that we have, and between Sergey's pixel perfect solution, and between which inclusively adaptive to keep the same size across all devices, you've got everything you need for any scenario. Although you may have to do extra work for some outlier in your app, be it that you want a certain alignment, or Sergey's situation where he wanted to deal with knowing the maximum size he needed for his ground texture or whatever he might use.
Yeah.
Another scenario.
Yeah, I think the one part about this is that again, like I said when we first started this conversation, was that it's generally a topic that's it's definitely confusing. It's because it's all kind of like scale factors and percentages and pixel points and all this other stuff like that. It can feel very squishy, where you don't really, you kind of get the general idea, but then when you go to implement it, you really spend some time playing with it to try to figure out what works best. So I would like to see that made simpler, that whole process just made simpler. That's what I would like to see, because that's one of the beauties of Corona, is that it abstracts a lot of those types of things. So I think we're headed down that path, but I definitely would like to see this to be a little less brain power. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just there, it just works, and you just don't have to even think about it, because it's at the end of the day, I don't think there's a whole lot of value to this part of that conversation. You just want it to, you just kind of want it to work right out of the box.
I wonder if with adaptive, and I could find this out by testing it, that you would see pixel tearing. So we talked about this when we were talking about Sergey's solution. Sergey's solution was the pixel perfect, so that you never had a rounded pixel that would get turned off on occasion. And I wonder if with adaptive you get rounded pixels and therefore pixel tearing or gaps between edges.
Yes, you can see on the image that you're looking at, content scale X and Y, it's not even. It's not whole values. It's not 0.5 or 0.25. It's 0.38. It's 0.75. It's not pixel perfect. It will tear.
Yeah, and I think it does kind of talk about that in the article, that these numbers are definitely not exactly the same all the time, even between platforms. You know, like iOS, there's some variation between the sizes, between the the pixel points, and then when you get into Android, of course, there's a lot of differences there as well. So, but they all seem to generally agree on about a 160. I think a 160 pixel point. So you kind of get as close as you can get when trying to cover as many different devices as possible. So, which we were running out of time, but there was also a piece in the article about scaling thresholds. So be sure to pay attention to that, where you can go in and pick in your settings what you want to use. So whether do you want to use the 2x version or the 3x version, and it explains when you might want to use one or the other. So go check that out. And then also the other note in the article was that the simulator basically gives you a visual representation of what's on the screen, but then it's not going to give you a 100% representation of what you're going to see if it's actually on the device. So it's things may seem a little fuzzy or this or that. So what you want to do is get your stuff in the general position, get a visual representation of things, and then go ahead and build it, put it on the device, and make sure that it's it's what you want. The final product is what you want, and then you'll get that crisp final product, or a crisper final product, whatever, depending on what you're working on. Does that make sense?
And the lesson there is the one that everybody should follow is always test it on the device.
Yeah. The simulator is definitely that. It's a simulator. It's just supposed to be giving you a visual representation that you can work with on the machine. But yeah, putting it on the device is the true test always. Right. So, all right. Well, we've run out of time to talk about selling apps in China.
I was looking forward to that.
I know it. I was too. But we'll save that topic for next time. And we'll also talk about what was this other one I wanted to talk about was building multi-screen launch images using Xcode 6. So if you guys haven't had a chance, go check that out. For next time, there is a tutorial out there on how to get your apps to where they show not featured, but optimized for iPhone 6 and 6 Plus. So basically, if you want your app to show up as an optimized app in the App Store, you need to check out that tutorial, and we'll talk about that next time. All right, guys. Thanks for being here, and I love the conversation. Be sure to visit all the people who are on the panel here, all the great resources that are out there, and have a great week, and happy coding.
Cheers.
Bye.